Hello and welcome back to This Is Us Portland, a community conversation. We are very excited to have a special guest with us today. I am Mary Pont. I'm the Director of Youth and Senior Services. And today I have with me Alli Behnke. Hello, Alli.
I will say hello.
Yes, say hello,
I am
please.
the outreach coordinator here for the town of Portland, working with kids of all ages. And we have with us Joanna Crowell, who we're super excited to meet you. I love talking to you on the phone. You know how sometimes you meet somebody or you listen to someone on the phone and you know you're going to connect with them?
Yes.
You were one of those people for sure. She's a local licensed psychotherapist. She is currently in private practice, also teaching at a local university. And she's here to talk to us about substance abuse, which is one of those topics that sometimes we don't want to talk about. But we are here to break down some barriers and break down some walls and really talk about how recreational use with our youth, so something we deem as not really a big deal, really can turn to some serious issues with addiction and beyond. Welcome.
I think one of the things that we certainly want to stress with our community is that sometimes the information you're getting might not be correct, and that we want to just try to get correct information out and give people the knowledge, so that if they have questions, then they can reach out with a really good question versus second guessing or going with maybe someone is telling them something that they're sort of cocking their head and saying, I don't know about that. But without the proper information or that proper information with what we're talking about, it's hard sometimes to counteract that negative wording that's going around our town.
Yeah.
So let's get started, because we've got such a long list of things we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, with you.
Absolutely. Well, I think, amidst this opiate crisis that's going on, that has gotten pretty bad, and a lot of us know someone who's lost someone to an overdose. Parents are saying, how is this happening? And what happens is recreation can sometimes turn into addiction. And it's having that open dialogue with your children about how that might happen and understanding what can propel some of these kids into an addiction. And the gateway drugs, I think we're not really clear about what is a gateway drug. And now that we're studying it more, we can see that gateways start with nicotine. So vaping, smoking, cannabis is another one that's going to take you even further, and alcohol as well. And so as this vape culture has really started, I think parents aren't even aware sometimes that their kids are vaping. I remember being a teenager. If you smoked, you could smell the smoke on your clothing. But now this vape juice that can be grape flavored or watermelon flavored, and it's a steam, you may not be aware that your child is doing it. And these vapes can look like those little external hard drives, those jewels. Like, it can be laying on the kitchen table, and as a parent, if you don't know what to look for, you can walk right by it, not understanding that your kid is involved in nicotine.
Yeah. Right. And I think, what we're seeing is that it's commonplace. So it's real easy as a parent, and I am a parent, to say, not my kid. They're not doing that, and not realize that it really is very commonplace in our 6th, 7th, 8th grade and up population. And that it doesn't necessarily mean your kid's the bad kid. Your kid could be an awesome student. Your kid could be involved in all these extracurriculars and still be vaping, because it's really commonplace and I think very accepted.
One of the things that we have seen is, over the course of the last few years, that the smoking has gone way down. And I think it is not acceptable anymore to walk around smelling. Like, I know those that do not smoke, someone that walks by you know right away that they are a smoker. And I don't think they recognize that. So I think they've gotten to the point where they don't want to offend others because people will back away from them. So the smoking level has gone down in our town as far as our youth. But then to see it go back up with the vaping issue, because it doesn't leave that scent, which to me is a big deal, that they're doing it because it doesn't leave the scent, and they're not realizing, I don't think, the ramifications of what's in them.
Right.
And it certainly isn't just the vaping issue, it's other issues as well, but we're seeing that as the rise, and it's the others that we're seeing.
Well, it's kind of fun too, because it's flavors and colors and designs.
Well, they like to make
it's kind of
the smoke into different, I don't know. They use it as sort of a design thing. They like to be creative with their smoking coming out to make it look more creative. That's what I've been told. So they go in their small corner and work on how it's going to look as it's coming out.
So I guess the question is, why is it dangerous?
The nicotine,
Right? Or why is vaping, from your perspective, working with in alcohol and drug recovery, why is it dangerous? Why is it dangerous as a gateway drug? Why is it something that parents should educate themselves on and know if their kid's involved in it?
Sure. The studies that come out show that people that have crossed the line into full-blown addiction,
Right.
96% of them smoke cigarettes.
Right.
So we know that it's starting there, or use nicotine in some form.
Yeah.
The Monitoring the Future study, that is a survey that goes around to high schools throughout the United States. In 2010, it came out that more teenagers smoked cannabis than cigarettes. So as we look at people vaping and the perception that nicotine is not dangerous, also the perception that marijuana is not dangerous is coming out. So we're seeing this crossover to more of the teenagers smoking cannabis. One thing we do know about cannabis and the developing brain is that they do not go together. So between the ages of 15 and 25, your brain is going through a process called shedding. It's remodeling to set you up for the rest of your life. Yeah. And during that time, to introduce anything addictive into it, whether it be nicotine or marijuana, can be very dangerous and can restructure your brain to the point that you will cross the line into active addiction. The definition of addiction is it's a chronic relapsing brain disease. Right. It causes a restructuring of your brain where the pleasure reward system of your brain and rational thinking stop talking. Mm-hmm. So if between the ages of 15 and 25 you take an addictive, like psychoactive substance, you continue to use it, you affect that remodeling.
Right.
And a study came out in 2012 in New Zealand with 1,000 young people. And what the result of that study was, that if you become cannabis dependent between 15 and 25, they found an on average 8-point drop in your IQ. Wow. That did not reset.
Right.
So that's something to be concerned about. So you start with the nicotine, you're crossing over to the cannabis, and then you may set yourself up for whether it be an opioid addiction, an alcohol addiction, or a cocaine addiction. Right. So they just kind of they build on one another.
So you've got to worry about the
progression,
but you also have to worry about the brain science. So even if you stop, and you hear this a lot from parents and kids, all I do is smoke pot. All they do is smoke pot. Even if, say, you didn't use that as a gateway drug into something else, you're seriously shaping your future, because you're lowering your IQ, you're lowering your social emotional ability, you're restructuring your brain. And I think that's information that parents maybe don't know. It's really easy to say it's just pot.
Well, I think
it's no big deal.
Or to say, what's the big deal? And they have to get to the point where they do understand it is a big deal. I mean, the age range you're talking, they're not rational at that age anyways, not using anything at all, because they're not making rational decisions. So to add something on top of that that's going to make sure that they're not going to be making rational decisions is not a good thing, certainly as their brain develops.
Sure, and with the legalization, I think we've been able to conduct more of these studies. So the Marijuana Accountability Coalition in 2018 said that since the legalization of cannabis in Colorado, there's an increase in youth suicides, an increase in alcohol consumption in the state. Calls to the poison control centers increased 210%.
Wow.
There's an increase in cannabis-related ED visits, and driving under the influence of drugs, with 76% of the arrests in Colorado have cannabis on board. So, and 88% of the fatal traffic accidents have marijuana involvement. 88% of the traffic accidents that are fatal have marijuana on board. So it's not harmless. But the perception is now that it's legal, it's got, it's fine, it's legalized now. But teen suicide's an increase. Right. We know that one of the risk factors for suicide is substance use. Right. So there are risks that we aren't talking about, I don't think, enough. Right. Because we want to protect our children. Right. But it's not harmless.
Right. Well, you were talking earlier, a kind of off scene, which maybe we should have done, but you were talking about it as a stimulant. Can you speak more to that? Kind of the understanding, how we even understand THC's involvement in our bodies, I think is different than what it actually does.
Right. So cannabis has 420 psychoactive chemicals in it.
Right.
So it's going to react to every brain differently. And that's what people don't understand. If you have a family history of schizophrenia and your 15-year-old starts smoking cannabis daily, what we're seeing in those ED visits
Right.
are people are like the kids are showing up with psychosis.
Right.
And so we call it a cannabis-induced psychosis, which can sometimes be prodromal to schizophrenia.
Right.
And we're not sure if the schizophrenia would have shown up anyway, or had they not used the cannabis regularly, would they have avoided that?
Right.
So that's one of the dangers.
Right.
And it's not as uncommon as you would think. Adults are showing up with psychosis in the ED because
Right.
people aren't realizing that with those 420 psychoactive chemicals, part of it's a hallucinogen. So
Yeah.
people get delusional. People, like, your reaction time while you're driving slows down.
Right.
There's confusion. So if you're sitting at home on the couch not going anywhere and you're over 25, maybe not so dangerous.
Right.
But if you're going about your daily life, you're getting in a car, you're driving, like, I don't know what's going to happen to your brain.
Right.
Because, like,
Right.
I might be fine, and you
Right.
might be hiding under the desk paranoid.
Right.
And you might be, like, sitting on the couch unable to move.
Right.
And because
Right.
there's 420
Right.
chemicals in there,
Right.
like, everybody's a little bit different.
Right.
So when people go to the dispensaries and they get it and they said, oh, it's going to treat my anxiety, it might for you and it might not.
Right.
And that's why the FDA is saying we cannot.
Or it might exacerbate your anxieties or exacerbate your underlying mental health. I don't want to say condition, but your reality someday. Say you have a student who maybe is someday going to develop schizophrenia or the symptoms, the signs of it. This might exacerbate that, bring it out earlier or bring it out at all. Maybe it would have stayed hidden, and I think that's something that most people don't realize.
Right, and with mood disorders too, and depression is a mood disorder. So one of the things that the tenets of depression is low mood, low motivation, and a thing we call anhedonia. And if you start smoking pot every day, that's what pot may do for you. And so you may become even more depressed and go from a mild major depressive disorder to severe because you're medicating it with something that on your brain is going to react differently. So there's so many variables with all those chemicals that we can't discern what it's going to do to each person. So the harmlessness is a fallacy.
Right.
Not that there isn't a place for it medically.
Right.
Like, I know for chronic pain, like an opiate or medical marijuana, personal decision.
Right.
But we know that there's a lot with a prescribed opiate that could be a danger. So I don't want to say it's a bad thing, but for a child 15 to 25, one thing that we can say pretty much across the board in the American Psychological Association is not a good idea.
Not a good idea. So
Not a good idea.
we always like to wear the prevention hat with youth services. So what's the prevention approach for parents? So what's something that you could say to them, your kids are school age, they're young middle school, you're looking towards, your youth growing up. What are some things that you can start doing? What are some prevention approaches that can happen now? Awareness, education, whatever it might be. What are those things that we could advise our parents to start looking for, to start doing, just to get the ball rolling in terms of understanding this phenomena that is probably not going to get better. It's probably going to get worse. So it's not going to go away. So how do we deal with it as a parent?
Really good question, Alli. Conversations. So it should not be a taboo conversation.
Right.
Talk about nicotine. Talk about marijuana. Talk about drugs. But also give your children positive coping skills.
Yeah.
Because drugs are mood and mind altering. So when kids don't like their mood, they don't like what's going on in their life, and they pick up a psychoactive substance to feel better, even with nicotine, I need my Juul, I need to vape because I'm stressed out.
Right.
So when you start to engage in that behavior, it becomes easier to pick up harder things to manage that behavior. So when you have your children, it's like, if you're uncomfortable, take a walk, let's draw a picture, let's journal, let's constantly talk about the mood of your child and how you can help them manage it in a healthy way.
Right. And that talking about emotions from a very young age, be they positive or challenging emotions, is a really healthy thing. So communicating with your kids young, these are coping skills that you may have and that you can utilize so that they build on those, kind of that bridge and framework. So by the time they reach age where they're going to pick up a Juul or they're going to smoke pot or whatever it is, they have kind of all those tools in their toolbox.
Yes.
They have them already. They've been talked about ad nauseum.
Yes. I think with the Juuls, what we're seeing is that they don't quite understand how much is in the Juul. That they carry that it's the crutch that they can walk up and down the hall and nobody's going to know that they're doing it. And by the end of the day, they've actually smoked a lot of cigarettes. They've smoked almost a pack of cigarettes in some of those Juuls. And I don't think they realize that or they don't understand it. So the more you smoke, the more you are smoking, which then you have to smoke more. How does that calculate? Because they need to smoke more to get a better high, smoke more to get to a different level.
Right. And that's one of the symptoms of addiction is using more than you initially intended to. Right. Oh, my Juul is empty, but I thought it was going to last 3 days. That's a sign that something's going in the wrong direction. Mm-hmm. And so it's having that open conversation. Let's say your kid is using a Juul.
Right.
Start talking. Start talking about it. How much are you using? Do you want to quit? Some kids really need therapy. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's contacting a psychotherapist. Family therapy is another good thing.
Right.
But, just because they're using doesn't mean they're an addict, but it means that they can cross that line. Right. So instead of reprimanding, I know one thing, kids are rebellious and they have poor impulse control. If you say don't do it, they may do it more.
Right.
So being aware that they're doing it and talking about how much they're doing and being involved in it,
right.
and then trying to see how you can help.
Right.
Like, are you able to quit? Or do you want to cut down? Can I help you with this? Instead of bad, you're very bad.
Right.
No, it's like there's something going on and they're feeling a need to
Right,
cope.
which, from a mental health perspective, the bad, you're very, very bad, that's probably what they're trying to cope with anyway.
Yes.
Is that feeling of I'm bad.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of like laying it on top. So I think that leads to the next thing, the intervention piece. What if you as a parent, you feel hopeless, you don't know where to go, you don't know who to go to? What's a good place? Where do you start? Where do you start where you're going to feel safe? There's that feeling of shame, embarrassment, all those things that is all supernatural that we all feel when it comes to your families, and especially a problem in your family. What would be a starting point for a family?
That's a good question too. A starting point could be a call to a psychotherapist is a good one. But then there's things like at the Portland Congregational Church on Tuesday nights, there's Families Anonymous. Yeah. And so you can go in and talk to other families that are having issues around addiction with their family members, and have a safe place to talk there. There's Al-Anon, there's Nar-Anon, there's NAMI. Right. So there's a lot of resources. It's using them. Call 211. 211 is a great resource. Right. If you have a teenager that's out of control and high and you don't know what to do and you call 211, they can send a mobile crisis team out to your house to help you manage. Right in the moment. And that's, 211's a wonderful resource. If you want to quit smoking, you can call 211. The state of Connecticut is really invested in people wanting to get off of nicotine. Right. And you can get a quit coach that you talk to every day. Right. So the resources are there. It's just knowing when it's time to use them.
Right. And not being afraid to do it.
Yes.
And kind of taking that step. I know at youth services, we're always an open resource as a gateway to putting you in the right direction. Your school, the schools, our local schools, also always in communication. Just another way that if you reach out, they'll point you in the right direction.
Yeah.
They're not going to solve the problem, but they will. Yes, we will point you in the right direction. So there are resources. It's just, I think one of our goals is helping families realize that they're there and to please use them.
Yes.
Please come forward. Like there's no judgment. There's just a desire to help. There's really a true place of wanting to help families be healthy.
Absolutely.
And to reach out to those places, it's a place of safety. You can go to the counselors in school. I have a great counselor at youth services, Chris Napolitano, who's been with me for 19 years. His main job, he works at the Ecumenical Department of Psychiatry, and has many of our families that come to see him with issues within the family. Sometimes they're drug issues, sometimes they're other issues, but he is very well versed in that. as well as we have counselors here at school now by way of the community health center. So they have hands-on, and all of those places are safe places that you can go to, you can talk about it, and no one is going to turn around and say, well, I don't know about that kid. I think they need to know that is a safe place that they can go and speak their heart and speak their mind of what's going on with them.
Right, and to know that it could happen to anyone.
Or the
You're
parents.
not a bad parent if you
Right.
have a child that's
Exactly.
acting out.
Right.
And I think a lot of parents are like, oh my gosh,
How
my
did that
child
happen?
is smoking pot or is stealing alcohol from my liquor cabinet. I'm a bad parent. It's like, no, like it can happen to anybody.
Yes.
All it means is that you need to have an intervention. You need to open up a dialogue. And the best parents have issues with their children.
And it happens to so many more people than you're even aware of.
Right.
You're not in a silo. You feel like you are. You do it a lot of, in a lot of things in your life. You feel like you're kind of living this isolated challenge, but it's bigger than you think, and it's happening to more.
Right.
And that's the awareness piece, the education.
And the screen time. I think our kids spend a lot of time in front of screens, kind of in this escape. And the more you can get your child outside, going for a walk, engaging away from the screen. I know some parents have said, I want them to have no screen time. It's like, why not open up a dialogue? Why are you spending so much time on your screen?
Right.
Is there something going on that you're trying to avoid?
Instead of just removing.
Right.
Yeah, that's another whole conversation. I think this might be a good way to segue into what we're hoping to do at Youth Services this year, which is really address this kind of this issue of substance abuse with our youth and, across the lifespan. That's kind of one of our goals this year and bringing that forward. So the next step with Joanna is really to start a community conversation, a real life, workshop where we have people who want to come out, all people, so all ages, parents, kids, other community members, and can we create an opportunity for people to come together, ask questions, hear this information live. So I think that's where we're headed next.
Yes.
And look for that information
definitely.
in the school newsletters, Youth Services, and the newspapers will have it publicized. But that's kind of where we're going, and we hope and encourage all community members to come out and talk about this issue that is so real.
And knowledge is power.
So real.
Knowledge is power. You need to know that knowledge, and you need to know the correct information.
Right.
We did have, in one of our other podcasts, we did have our fire chief here and explaining what they are seeing in our town as first responders. And you start at that. You start with those first responders that are on the scene and what they have to deal with on a daily basis and not know what they're going to come across when they respond to any kind of call that they're doing right now. So everyone that is out there needs that knowledge and needs that power within themselves to look at things objectively and get better information.
Right, and be able to help those we love.
Absolutely.
That's kind of the goal.
It takes a village.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We look forward to
And I
talking to you
think
some more.
we could be going on for I don't know how much longer, but I know that you have to go somewhere else, and our podcast is coming to a close. So
we want to
again,
save
thank
some
you so
stuff
much.
too.
We do want to save
for
some
the
stuff
live
for
community
another.
conversation. All right,
Yes,
thank
so-
you. Have a good
Thank
day.
you, Joanne.